Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will.
Yeah, right.
I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Furman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook. The time is upon us, friends. It's finally National Football League season around these parts, as we'll get into our 8 NFL divisional previews. But before we do that, I want to remind all of you, sign up at FanDuel Sportsbook, use the promo code BetTheBoard, take advantage of your no-sweat bet. Whether you're looking to bet preseason football, you're trying to get in on college football, win totals, Major League Baseball, you name it, FanDuel has you covered with your first no-sweat bet. Use the promo code BetTheBoard, up to $1,000, absolutely free. I'm your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, as much as we've gradually gotten you to buy into the college football lifestyle, I know the National Football League is your baby. You got to be excited that we're kicking off these preview series, knowing that the start of the regular season is not too far in the near future.
I'm supposed to say I'm really excited, aren't I?
Yeah, I mean, you're supposed to say you're excited. We know you're full of shit, and then we get on with the first 4 of the 32 teams that we have to chronicle to kick things off.
I'm starting to grow a passion for college football, but I do enjoy the NFL better. It's just a better product. I understand what's behind college football, right? But I just think it's a better product. It's very similar with me to college basketball. I like college basketball, but I just... the NBA is a far superior product. People can hit jump shots. People can, finish at the hoop. The product is just far superior. And I think when we talk about the AFC this year, boy, is it loaded.
Yeah, I'm not sure I even ascribe to enjoying college basketball like I once did, but that's a different discussion entirely for a different day. But to your point, the National Football League played at the highest levels. We know we all carve out times Monday, Thursday, and throughout the course of our Sundays to watch all these teams from start to finish. And I think more than any other sport in this fine country, it's one where hope springs eternal. Year in, year out, you see teams rise from worst to first in the division. You see those success stories like we did with the Cincinnati Bengals last year. And this division, there are a couple fan bases that are brimming with optimism. We may be here to douse some of those flames, but more on that when we get there. So we'll start and run these teams through an alphabetical order to avoid any of the potential bias that's here. But before we do, I want to encourage everybody out there to follow Payne on Twitter. That's at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And it's only fitting, Payne, we kick off the NFL preview series with the Super Bowl favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. That, of course, being the Buffalo Bills, who find themselves at plus 650 to hoist the Lombardi Trophy for the first time in franchise history, minus 220 to emerge atop the heap in the AFC East, and their win total, 11.5, shaded to the over. You do need to lay $1.35 to try and get there. And when you're talking about the Buffalo Bills, they're trying to make their first appearance in the Super Bowl since 1993, harking back to simpler times with Jim Kelly under center and Marv Levy pacing the sidelines. Their 3 straight playoff appearances are actually the longest since they made 6 straight in their glory days in the late 80s, early 90s. Last season, the Bills were a bit of an enigma. They did lose all 5 games decided by a single score. They were extremely fortunate with injury luck, lost the 3rd least games on offense and 5th most on defense. The schedule this season, favorable with 3 Thursday games. 2 will create a little bit of a rest edge. Of course, they'll kick things off week 1 on that Thursday night against the defending Super Bowl champs in the Los Angeles Rams. But Payne, when you look at this team, all the talk obviously about Josh Allen, his ongoing maturation, what we've seen with the development of his skill set, both as a passer, as a runner, but there is going to be a key absence on that Buffalo sidelines, and offensive coordinator Brian Daboll. Suffice to say, Josh Allen can take the next step, or it could be a little bit of an adjustment period with Ken Dorsey calling the shots.
This is tough. My goal here isn't to dumb down our Bills' offensive breakdown, but I'm not really sure serves a purpose, talking about how good metrically Josh Allen is and, how good some of the weapons are with Diggs and Davis, or how Buffalo went all in, adding depth at receiver and pairing O.J. Howard with Dawson Knox. Then you go out and draft James Cook. The weapons are plentiful. That's obvious. The biggest thing we have to figure out, and ultimately this will determine if the Bills can truly compete for a Super Bowl, is you have a first-year NFL offensive coordinator in Ken Dorsey. Will Ken Dorsey have a backbone and run the system he wants, or is he going to kowtow to Sean McDermott and run a less efficient offense to appease the boss? That's really what this comes down to. And my understanding is that if Brian Daboll didn't get the Giants head coaching job, there was a good chance Dabes would have personally chosen not to return to Buffalo as their OC. There was infighting between Daboll and McDermott that started back in camp last year. And it finally carried over publicly, where McDermott was firing jabs and pressers after the Colts and Patriots losses. Numerous times, you had McDermott just calling out the offense for a lack of physicality. And there was one specific quote about physicality and a lack of running where McDermott said, "That's been my message from day one. I can promise you that. If you were in team meetings during training camp, you would know what style of offense I want. That identity needs to embody toughness." Unfortunately, McDermott didn't understand his offensive line, and running backs didn't allow for that style. Buffalo's offensive line was 8th in pass block win rate, but they were 23rd in run block win rate. McDermott still wanted more early down runs, but Buffalo's 26% success rate on first down runs. That was 30th in the league. Daboll absolutely had the right game plans in place for the personnel he had, and that was evident with the Bills' offense punting less than any other offense over the last 2 seasons. He knew what he was doing. He knew the pieces that he had, and I think he was executing with those pieces perfectly. And word out of camp right now is that Ken Dorsey is saying he wants to be aggressive, but it comes with this caveat of wanting to expand personnel groupings. He wants an offense with a broad and wide scope, is what he was saying. And for a team that had Dawson Knox to go out and sign O.J. Howard, you're absolutely going to see more 12 and 13 personnel because of that, something Daboll only used 8% of the time. But I'll be honest, I am still not sold on the offensive line. As it stands right now, 3 projected starters haven't taken 11 on 11 snaps yet in camp. Roger Saffold was brought in to help the run game. Damn good run blocker the last 5 seasons, but he's 34 years old. Maybe Spencer Brown makes a year 2 leap, but he was well below average at right tackle. Mitch Morse is a better pass blocker than run blocker. There's very little depth along the Bills' offensive front. McDermott also decided to be a walking contradiction this offseason where he wants increased running, but not as much from Josh Allen. And so there was a McDermott quote back on March 26th where he said, "We're always trying to evolve. And in this case, with Josh's running or the amount of times you run him, we have to continue to evolve. That way we make sure we're doing right by him by doing right by our team." Just shoot me in the face, right? Like Josh Allen's impromptu scrambles yielded almost 1 expected point per rush. Josh Allen's designed runs dwarfed those of running back runs in terms of EPA per rush. And ultimately, this discussion comes down to, do you want 10 years of Josh Allen playing less efficient football, or do you want 7 years of him playing peak efficient football and competing for Super Bowls? And so you're definitely wanting the latter there. In the pass game, all the chatter's been about Josh Allen improving accuracy to assist in yards after the catch, since the Bills were dead last in yards after the catch per completion. To me, that suggests Buffalo's offense wants less air yards and a more controlled passing attack. But if you look at Josh Allen's metrics, 116 passer rating on throws of 10 or more yards, just 92 on throws of less than 10 yards. So it makes me really nervous that these are the things being discussed. And so I think there's an ability here for Buffalo to downtrend a little bit offensively. And you're looking at a Buffalo team that faced the very easiest schedule in 2021. Now they go and face an average schedule this season. Buffalo also had the 3rd best offensive injury health. Bottom line, I know what Daboll was doing for this offense, and my gut tells me if Buffalo's offense operates with a Sean McDermott governor on it, while the schedule difficulty increases, I don't think a Super Bowl is obtainable. And the way Buffalo's operated the last 12 months, it's been an all-or-nothing approach to roster building, right? It's Super Bowl or bust here, Todd.
We're going to have to get a live feed of you watching the Bills on that Thursday night when it's 2nd and 9 and you see an inefficient run setting up a 3rd and 7 type scenario against the Rams defensive front, so Sean McDermott can get this team to impose its will physically rather than catering to its unique set of players and talent in Josh Allen and taking advantage of, to your point, what he can do with his legs from extending plays. And you saw how valuable that component was with arguably the most efficient offensive performance of the entire NFL postseason, their playoff opener against the New England Patriots. If their offense is poised to regress, Payne, that would mean that their defense has to pick up the slack if they're going to bring the Lombardi Trophy back to Western New York. And when you look at Buffalo last year, the stop unit finished number 1 in a lot of key categories. Soft schedule, though, weather games, a lot of noise in the numbers. Is there reason to be skeptical that Buffalo's defense wasn't nearly as good as what they look like with the final season metrics?
Oh, we were really adamant throughout last season the Bills' defense wasn't nearly as good as the metrics indicated. I'll be honest. I think sometimes coming up with the perfect weight distribution for opponent and schedule is more difficult than people think, especially when you're factoring in team performance for an entire season or a sector of the season. But any singular matchup might really be impacted by injury or weather, as you're alluding to. And so on the surface, the Bills played the very easiest schedule of offenses last season, but it might actually be worse than we think when factoring in Buffalo played some of these opponents at less than 100%, right? 5 times the Bills played a backup or a third-string quarterback. Buffalo ended up playing the easiest schedule of quarterbacks by our numbers. The only offenses the Bills played that ranked better than 20th in schedule-adjusted efficiency last season were the Chiefs, Colts, Buccaneers, and Patriots. The Chiefs, Colts, and Buccaneers averaged nearly 39 points per game in those matchups. Severe weather aided Buffalo's defense last season, and most notably in both Patriots games, but throughout the course of the season as well. There was wind in the Washington game. Where I'm going with this is, like, even with some metrics indicating Buffalo had the number 1 defense, and the defense was, top 5 in injury luck and had fumble luck on their side as well, I think Buffalo has a chance to be better defensively this season while not reaching that number 1 rank. I like the Bills' front 7. Von Miller clearly still has juice. That's pretty evident by the pass rush grade in the playoffs. It was the best of any edge rusher. Word is Gregory Rousseau is turning into an absolute monster. A.J. Epinesa is improving. Buffalo signed Daquan Jones. He's a plus interior lineman to pair with Ed Oliver. They stack some depth there with Tim Settle. Both Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano are in contract years, and we as men can be motivated by money. Buffalo also faces a below average schedule of pass blocking offensive line. So I don't see pressure being an issue this season. In the back, Tre'Davious White looks like he's progressing nicely from a November knee tear. Has exactly 5 weeks to the day to get ready to play against the Rams, but looks like he's trending towards that. Ka'ir Elam is a Florida kid. I know well he's going to be a day 1 starter opposite White. The guy is an absolute ball hawk. He allowed a catch rate nearly 30% below expectation the last 2 seasons combined while playing 2 different systems for a Gators program that was in turmoil. Let's keep an eye on Jordan Poyer. He was carted off this week after hyperextending his elbow in camp. Word is that Poyer's going to be back in a couple of weeks, and he should be ready for the Rams game. Micah Hyde left with a back hip injury, was told that was just a severe bruise, nothing to worry about long term. Again, I'm not sure this defense will grade out as well metrically this season because of the increased schedule of offenses, but I think it absolutely feels like Buffalo's better built defensively for a playoff run.
You mentioned some of that young talent, and I think that was evidence when you read a lot of the Buffalo Bills beat writers talking about the increased productivity they have to get from A.J. Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, who you mentioned. They also throw Carlos Basham out there as a player that has to raise his level of commitment in terms of on-field production. But the other player you talked about, and I didn't realize how good he was until I looked at some of the numbers. Do you buy everything you're seeing with Ed Oliver? I know the criticism for him coming out of Houston was that he had short arms. It could limit his ability to be able to get off some of the blocks. But this was a player who we saw dominate at the group of 5 level. There was some skepticism in the National Football League. He feels like he's really settling into his own, becoming that disruptive force in the middle of the defensive line that Buffalo needs so desperately.
He came in undersized in that he was more of a pass rusher than a run stuffer. And you could see that Buffalo was a little soft on the interior in past years. obviously, when he graded out last year, he was fantastic in pass rush win rate. That is his specialty, but he did enhance his ability to stop the run a little bit, and it was by far his best season. You're hoping that it carries over, and now he's got some big guys behind him, with Settle and Daquan Jones being signed as well. So it feels like the interior of the defense a little bit more physical than it's been in years past for Buffalo.
Which will clearly be something that Sean McDermott wants to see. When you look at Buffalo's schedule, they get things started in primetime at the Rams, and their schedule leading up to their bye. Home game against the Titans. They'll go on the road to South Florida, take on the Dolphins, follow that up with a road game against the Ravens, home against the Steelers, and at the Chiefs. So to your point, talking about schedule difficulty, we're going to learn quite a bit about the Buffalo Bills through their first 6 games and exactly what this offense looks like without their architect there in Brian Daboll, and if this defense can realize some of its potential. So a fun team to watch, no doubt. Plus 650, maybe in my opinion, a little bit overvalued as far as expectations for the Super Bowl. From Western New York down to South Florida and the Miami Dolphins. When you look at Miami's numbers this season, 40-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook to win the Super Bowl. They're 9-2, listed in that second spot to emerge atop the AFC East, and their win total, 8.5. You do have to lay $1.35 if you want to go over the total. When you talk about Miami Dolphins football, there's a little bit of futility that goes along with it. It's been 29 straight seasons without a conference championship. The only 2 teams in the National Football League that have gone longer, the Detroit Lions and the Washington Commanders. 21 seasons and counting now without winning a playoff game. Only the Detroit Lions have a longer stretch at 30. The Dolphins also last made the postseason back in 2016. But interestingly enough, when you dig into Miami, and we talk all the time about what kind of home field advantage they have early in the year dealing with the heat and humidity, what stood out to me, Payne, going back to 2019, only Kansas City and Green Bay have a better win percentage from November through January. So Miami has gotten better as the season has progressed. Unfortunately for this Dolphins team, last year they dug themselves such a hole they weren't able to overcome it. And we now have Mike McDaniel steps in as a head coach, an offensive-minded individual who comes from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. And when you look at the way this Dolphins team is being talked about, a lot of reason for optimism given all of the expenditures that they made to bring in game breakers to pair with 2 on the offensive side.
It's always interesting to see how that matriculates as the offseason continues to move forward, right? There's the bettors that are getting out ahead are quietly high on the Dolphins, and then some more money starts to come in, and now all of a sudden we're starting to ramp up, and the Dolphins are becoming quite popular, which is interesting to me. Listen, no single offense in the NFL had greater change for the good this offseason than the Miami Dolphins. Let's see what the execution looks like. But going from a defensive-minded head coach that hated the starting quarterback to an offensive-minded Mike McDaniels, who, if you've heard Kyle Shanahan talk about him, he profusely claims to be the best offensive mind he's ever worked with. And that is very high praise and a massive upgrade. From a personnel standpoint, I think it's easiest to start from the inside, work our way out. It's very clear Chris Grier understood that Miami's offensive line was horrific. They graded out the worst in pass protection and finished dead last in pass block win rate despite facing a bottom 5 schedule of pass rushing defenses. So he goes out, signs the best left tackle in free agency with Teron Armstead. Armstead was a guy that only allowed a 4.5% pressure rate last season. Connor Williams, a former second-round pick, he's made huge strides, improved each of the last 4 seasons. He's versatile, can play guard, tackle in a pinch, and now center, although there's been some early camp snap problems there. But Connor Williams gave up less than a 2.5% pressure rate last season. Robert Hunt has proven to be a solid guard. He's now entering year 3, came into camp in the best shape of his life. You have Liam Eichenberg. He can slide to a position he was actually drafted to play, and that's guard. But Miami forced the rookie to play tackle last season. He was in way over his head. And then there's been some rave reviews about Austin Jackson's revamped body. He was drafted as a 19-year-old. It was clear it was going to take some time, but apparently Jackson's taken well to the new scheme, and because of that, it just really fits his skill set a little bit more. Running back room was affordably upgraded from 2 undrafted backs to now proven talent. You have Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, who's familiar with McDaniel's system, and Sony Michel. None of those contracts are extensive in years or money, and I would fully expect an increased run rate from Miami this season as they try to recreate this 49ers offensive identity, and because Miami's projected to face a bottom 5 schedule of run defenses this season. Then you look at the pass game. Obviously starts with Tua. He's 2.5 years removed from a career-threatening hip injury. Tua says he feels stronger. He's more confident. And word is there's more zip on the ball. And really, no matter what you think about Tua, and there is this negative narrative there because it's clear Justin Herbert's better, but that doesn't mean Tua's not capable. And the one thing that we've really kind of lauded Tua for is his accuracy. And I think we'll see that on display more this season when the enhanced offensive philosophy and pass catchers are just way better than what he's dealt with in the past. Even last year, Tua managed to finish top 10 in completion percentage above expectation while having the highest rate of tight window throws. So he's throwing into the most traffic, and he's still top 10 in completion percentage above expectation. It's really tough to do. You think about Tua's first 2 seasons in the league, and he has 3 offensive coordinators. Chan Gailey year 1, who's old. And last season, there was a dual coordinator system.
Short and concise to describe Chan Gailey's offensive philosophy.
Old, outdated. Neither of the coordinators last year knew who was calling plays until 10 days before the regular season started, and then that changed after 4 weeks. Just an epic disaster from Brian Flores, who had a new OC every single year he was with the Dolphins, and then his final year had 2. Into his 2020 rookie season, he's battling the hip injury. He's focused on recovery there more than learning the system. We mentioned Chan Gailey. On top of Chan Gailey, he's thrown to the likes of Devontae Parker, Jakeem Grant, Isaiah Ford, and an undrafted Myles Gaskin out of the backfield. Those were 4 of the top 5 targeted weapons that season. This year, Tua is going to have receivers that can separate with Tyreek, Waddle, and Wilson, and then you have a solid pass-catching tight end in Gesicki. And just that exchange, right, from Parker to Tyreek is massive. Tyreek was top 7 in adjusted yards above replacement. Devontae Parker was 74th. Parker was dead last in separation at 1.7 yards. Tyreek, 3.6 yards of separation per route run last season. Waddle is going to make the year 2 leap simply because he's not going to be the target of every defensive coordinator's game plan. Cedric Wilson is projected to be Miami's 3rd receiver. Last season, performance-wise, wide receiver 3 was Albert Wilson for the Dolphins. Albert Wilson was 76th in adjusted yards above replacement. Cedric Wilson, 27th, and Wilson averaged 3.5 yards of separation. This receiving core is completely night and day from a season ago. I'm also interested to see how Gesicki's used a little bit, right? He's not an inline tight end like a Kittle because he can't block. So if you look at his snap distribution, over 92% of Gesicki's routes were from the slot or out wide. What I'm hearing is that's why the Dolphins tagged him and didn't commit long-term before seeing how he fits in Mike McDaniel's offense. But undoubtedly, Gesicki's a nice weapon to have at tight end. Nearly 3 yards of separation per route run last season. That's very good for a tight end. Miami faces a schedule of defenses that's projected to be just average overall and against the pass. So this is a big stock arrow up for the Dolphins offense, Todd.
I really thought we were going to save the Devontae Parker slander until we broke down the New England Patriots, but I'm glad we got it out there early talking about separation and some of the things he didn't offer up for that Dolphins offense. You obviously mentioned Jalen Waddle. His 104 catches last year was the most by a rookie in league history, 3 better than what Anquan Boldin did previously back in 2003. That represented 24% of targets among all Dolphins wideouts. So you want to talk about a kid, to your point, who has the chance to really blow the ceiling off. Waddle would be one of those guys this season. And it is funny when you talk about narratives as far as professional sports are concerned, specifically around Tua in this case. The way most NFL talking heads make it sound is that Justin Herbert is Michael Jordan and the Dolphins having Tua is like drafting Sam Bowie 1 pick ahead of him. Let's pump the brakes a little bit there. I think watching him with an offensive line that hopefully can keep him upright, being surrounded by weapons, will be a much better indication of exactly what Tua can be and how they can maximize his skill set in a Mike McDaniels-led offense. As far as the Dolphins defense, Josh Boyer, of course, the one calling shots there. They add Melvin Ingram on the edge. You lose Justin Coleman and Jason McCourty in the secondary. And this was a Dolphins team that kind of had a tale of 2 seasons. When they started 1-7, they flirted with cellar-dwelling metrics. The final 9 games of the season, obviously coinciding with a schedule that lightened up considerably. They were 2nd in points per game allowed, 4th in passing yards per game, 2nd in total yards per game, and 3rd in third down defense. Now, when you look at the schedule of opposing offenses, at least on the surface, Payne, I don't have access to your metrics, but it does look like it's going to be significantly more challenging for this group. They're going to have to raise their level of play right out of the gates against the New England Patriots.
You're spot on, and that's why Mike McDaniel kept defensive coordinator Josh Boyer for continuity purposes with how they ended last season. I like his defensive style, which is very much aggressive, and so doesn't Mike McDaniel. Josh Boyer likes to confuse offenses by moving guys around pre-snap, and that makes it difficult to know where blitzers are coming from post-snap. We know Boyer loves to send heat. Miami sent pressure at the second highest rate in the league last season, nearly 40% of snaps. I'm interested to see if Jalen Phillips grows in year 2, and then you mentioned adding Melvin Ingram, knowing Van Ginkel accumulated a 15% pressure rate on pass rush snaps, and then Emmanuel Ogbah finally reaching his potential, if the blitz will be relied upon as much this season. And, you hinted at this at the top. Miami goes from facing the worst schedule of passing offenses to a fringe top 10 schedule of passing offenses. And better offenses will make you pay a little bit more when you send heat, regardless of how good your corners are. Christian Wilkins and Zach Seiler were solid run stuffers, graded out 2 of the better interior linemen in the league last season. Those 2 combined for a 13% stop rate on run plays. Overall, Miami's defense was top 10 in run stop win rate. Now, Miami does need to do a better job as tacklers in the run game and across the board. They graded out 26th in tackling and were bottom 10 in missed tackles. I think what we're all waiting for here is Miami's defense to go from a good defense, a fringe top 10 defense, to becoming elite. And looking at how Xavier Howard and Byron Jones played last season, both clearly have another gear. And if Miami wants to get to that elite status, both those guys have to start playing like the paycheck. But ultimately, I think if Miami can replicate last season's production while going from the third easiest schedule of offenses to a projected top 10 schedule, that's a massive win here. The continuity is there. The talent is there. The versatility has been on display when Josh Boyer goes with some of his 3 safety lineups. We've talked highly about Javon Holland. There's a possibility after this season he is talked about as one of the best safeties in all of football. His versatility is just through the roof. You can line him up in the slot and he can cover. You can put him on the end and he can rush. You can stick him in the back and play free safety and come down in the box and be a thumper. He can return bunts as well. Then you pair him with Brandon Jones and Eric Rowe. This was interesting because we knew Miami's defense was a little bit lacking in the linebacker room. That's the weakness. There's not a ton of depth there. So Boyer used nearly 200 snaps with that trio of safeties on the field at the same time, Holland, Jones, and Rowe. Miami only gave up 4.8 yards per play when they went with that 3 safety look. So there's a lot of versatility. There's a lot of chess pieces that can be moved around here. I also think the defense comes in feeling less pressure in 2022, right? The need to be relied upon as much, I think, subsides with a better offense now that Mike McDaniels is running the show.
Do you want to take the victory lap for Holland now? Because he was a player coming into the draft that you were extremely high on. I know you were thrilled when the Dolphins had, but at the same time, I do wonder if part of you feels a little bit conflicted having to heap such praise on a player who played his college football out on the West Coast.
So he was supposed to be a first-round pick, like a middle first-round pick, but sat out that final year at Oregon, and there were some question marks with him. But ultimately, that was a guy this organization wanted to play that Minkah Fitzpatrick role, but was also willing to be moved around. And that was the one thing Minkah Fitzpatrick did not want. Didn't want to be moved around the defense, wanted one position. And so Javon Hollins accepted that role, and just fantastic when you watch him. Let's see ultimately what comes of his season, but one of the best rookies across the board last year.
Should be a fun Dolphins team to watch. To your point, we know there are a lot of offensive difference makers there that can have a fantasy impact as well. When you look at the Dolphins' schedule, it'll be fascinating to see what the second half of the year looks like, because the Dolphins do have a Week 10 bye. Week 11, they get a home game against the Houston Texans, and then what could be a defining stretch of opponents. They'll play 3 straight road games, 2 on the West Coast, at the 49ers, at the Chargers. They'll head to Western New York, play at the Bills, a home game against the Packers. So very interesting team to watch. No doubt about it. Clearly, the talent has been upgraded, and with an offensive-minded head coach, it should pay significant dividends. I want to remind all of you, the loyal listeners out there, to follow Payne on Twitter, @PayneInsider. I'm Todd Furman. You, of course, can follow me there as well. But most importantly, follow the Bet the Board pod for all sorts of college football, NFL, and, of course, our new NASCAR podcast, Stay Green updates throughout the course of the season. From Miami to New England we go, Payne. And when you're looking at the New England Patriots season-long numbers at FanDuel Sportsbook. The Pats find themselves 40-1 long shots to win the Super Bowl this season. They're 5-1 to finish atop the AFC East. And when you're looking at their win total, 8.5, you do need to lay $1.15 to go over that particular total. And when you talk about the New England Patriots, just once in 19 seasons have they failed to reach double-digit wins. That happened for a very brief rebuild period the year after Tom Brady. They finished last season only, though, with 2 wins against teams with winning records, a beleaguered Titans side and a Bills team in a game that resembled a storm of the century type setting, so there is a little bit of noise in those numbers. When you look at this New England team on the offensive side, an interesting strategy in place here. They won't have a truly defined offensive coordinator. It'll be a joint compilation from Joe Judge and Matt Patricia. We'll see how long that works in their favor. First season without offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels since 2012, and with McDaniels at the helm, this group had a top 7 scoring offense every year but one. Changing offensive scheme, young quarterback. How bad are these growing pains potentially going to be for the Foxborough faithful?
I'm not sure what the offense looks like. And you mentioned what is being said, and what's coming out of camp is that there's going to be a streamlined process in an attempt to dumb it down. The Patriots want to play faster and put more stress on defenses by not allowing them to change personnel and substitute. That is completely different from what we've seen in the past, and ultimately we'll see if it comes to fruition on the field. But what's crystal clear from the Mac Jones interviews we've seen and heard over the first 10 days of camp, he's frustrated. The offense is getting their butt whipped by a defense that has question marks of its own. And the combination of Matt Patricia, a defensive mind guiding an offense, and Joe Judge, the guy that ran quarterback sneak last season on 3rd and 9, helping with the offense, is a scary thought. And what's being kind of outwardly said is the Patriots are changing run concepts from a gap style to a Kyle Shanahan zone-based scheme. And that we should all expect more play action and bootlegs from Mac Jones. Again, my understanding is the new implementation here has gone horrifically, and the passing game hasn't shown efficiency, and there's not many holes being created for the backs. It's not surprising that this change is going to take some time. The receiver group has separation anxiety, apparently. So expect more tight end splits and more bunch concepts to kind of systematically free receivers up and create separation, since they haven't shown an ability to beat man coverage thus far in camp. Up front, Ted Karras left in free agency. Shaq Mason was traded as a cap casualty. Both were top 7 among 88 qualifying guards in most key metrics. Now you have Cole Strange making the leap from the FCF's level to the NFL as a projected day 1 starter. Word out of camp here is plays are just getting blown up. Trent Brown has always been better as a pass protector than a run blocker. I think the Patriots' offensive line has to emerge somehow as a top 10 unit, or this offense is going to have some trouble. Now, we're looking for Mac Jones to make another leap to compensate for the loss of talent up and down this roster. And initially learning a brand new scheme could be tough. I loved what I saw from Mac Jones last season. He had the 8th best completion percentage over expectation while playing a top 10 schedule of pass defenses. Mac graded out a fringe top 10 quarterback and was far and away the best among the rookie crop. There were tons of positives year 1 for Mac. I just like everything about him, right? He's cerebral. He's well-studied, and those 2 things led to being a very quick and decisive passer. He can go through his progressions. Mac showed a willingness to push the ball downfield, but not put the ball in harm's way, and that's something you typically don't see from most quarterbacks, let alone rookies. But Mac Jones was 10th in attended air yards, but just 6th in turnover-worthy play rate. But when I look at this entire thing for me, offensively, if New England's ground game takes a step back learning this new scheme and receivers can't get open, and Mac's learning a new system on the fly with new voices in his ear, how much progress can we actually see from Mac Jones in year 2? You couple those things with a massive shift in schedule strength, and I have real concerns here. You zoom out on last season, and you hinted at this, Todd, the 10 wins that they had weren't all that impressive. There is a reason the Patriots win total opened up shorter than last season, and it's only 8.5 for an organization that's won double-digit games 18 of the last 19 seasons, and it's because the Patriots go from a schedule that was one of the 8 easiest to being one of the 7 toughest. New England only beat 2 teams with winning records last season. They had positive injury luck, positive field goal luck, positive red zone luck. Very rare you can have all 3 swing in your favor, even with an extremely buttoned-up Belichick team, and think that those are all going to happen again in 2022.
How fast, if this Patriots team struggles out of the gate moving the ball offensively, does the market catch up? In your opinion, are they being priced like the team we expect them to be with the win total right now, or are they being priced like the playoff team that we saw last season?
They're being priced like the 3rd best team in their own division.
It's a fair... it's a fair assessment.
I don't know. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And you know, when you talk about Belichick and his accomplishments and his brands, it would tell me that they're being priced like a team that has massive concerns. That's how I look at it. And I think ultimately we'll see how low the floor is. I think the floor is always going to be pretty high when you have Belichick, when you have a very cerebral quarterback like Mac Jones. And it just depends how quickly they can get the offense figured out. I don't like what they're doing with the coordinators that are managing the offense. I do like the idea of going a little bit more tempo. I like the idea of a zone scheme. I just don't know how quickly you can implement all those things and be ready for the start of the season, you know, flying high. I don't know if that's something that's reasonable to consider, right? Most transitions, when you talk to quarterbacks and head coaches, when you're starting a new system, 8 to 10 weeks is typically when you start firing on all cylinders.
For as much as we laud what Miami has done this offseason to try and upgrade their skill positions, of course, New England has a bevy of questions in their own right. We know how much money they spent last offseason, so clearly they're going to need to get more out of a player like Jonnu Smith, who finished with just 28 catches on 45 targets and 1 touchdown last year. Talked a little bit about Devontae Parker and your breakdown in terms of what he didn't provide for the Miami Dolphins. He's going to be expected to step in as a 1 or 1A receiver opposite Jacoby Myers. So not exactly a recipe for success when you don't have a lot of household names or difference makers, especially in the passing game, to aid a sophomore quarterback. As far as New England defensively, they do go out and make a couple of additions this offseason, bringing in Mack Wilson from Cleveland via trade. They bring Jabril Peppers in from the New York Giants. But the problem for that, with the in, there was a lot of out, and unfortunately a couple of their most impactful players, highlighted by lockdown corner J.C. Jackson, Kyle Van Noy, both go to the Chargers. And when you're looking at this team defensively, can they come anywhere close to some of the numbers they put forth? Because one thing we've seen with New England time and time again, it almost starts with the back and solidifying the cornerback and safety position, and then they worry about what they have on the defensive line and the linebacker spot. There are a lot more questions and a lot of veterans that are going to be tasked with key roles if they're going to play big-time snaps as far as the defensive backfield is concerned.
I think you have to be concerned relative to where the unit finished last season, which was the 4th best in schedule-adjusted efficiency. I don't see that being the case this season. I understand it's a Belichick system thing rather than a Jimmy's and Joe's thing, but there's holes on this unit, and there's not much depth along the defensive line. I like Christian Barmore. He was fantastic as a rookie, 12% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. That was top 15 among interior linemen. I think his role will expand. Belichick paid up for Matthew Judon, and you know, while he's a liability against the run, he was fantastic getting after the quarterback. Judon had a 15% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. He was 3rd in pressure rate among defensive ends. Past those two, there's a bunch of Jags on this defensive line, or unproven talent like a Josh Uche. Linebacker room appears slow and plodding with Bentley, who plays at nearly 260 pounds, and then you mentioned Belichick trading for Mack Wilson. He hovers around 245 pounds. Both those backers have proven to be liabilities in coverage. Kyle Van Noy is gone. The hope is Josh Uche can fill that pressure role from the outside back position of the Patriots 3-4. Dante Hightower and Jamie Collins haven't been resigned yet. But you add it all up, and losing Van Noy and Collins, who are 2 of the best cover linebackers in the NFL, could be pretty, troublesome this year. The secondary has depth, but there's very few premium players past Kyle Duggar. And I think that forces Belichick to play more zone this season. You have 2 aging veterans in Malcolm Butler and Devin McCourty. Those guys are back. McCourty's going to be 35 by the time the season starts. Jalen Mills is average in coverage. Terrence Mitchell is coming off his worst season ever. Bottom line, the loss of J.C. Jackson is going to be felt both in scheme and production. I don't trust any of these corners to consistently hold up in man coverage, something Belichick ran at the 3rd highest rate last season, and J.C. Jackson graded out the very best corner in man coverage in 2021. 2nd best since the 2018 season. You look at J.C. Jackson when targeted last season, surrendered a 52 passer rating. So this is going to be very difficult to overcome that loss just based on scheme and his ability to play within that scheme. Across the board, I just don't see the quality depth at D-line. Speed is lacking at linebacker. It's an aging secondary that won't be as versatile as last season. And we know Belichick's at his best when he has this, full board of chess pieces at his disposal. And then you think about the projected schedule of offenses New England's going to face in 2022. That increases. I don't think the Patriots defense sniffs the 4th best schedule adjusted unit again this year. Doesn't come close.
Didn't exactly sound like a ringing endorsement, talking about the lack of athleticism, slow plotting linebackers, and absence of difference makers in the secondary. This may have to be Bill Belichick's most masterful coaching job, trying to get as much as he possibly can out of a team, at least on paper, that doesn't appear to have the pieces necessary to play in the National Football League at the level that New England has grown accustomed to in recent years. And you mentioned that schedule for New England, not exactly easy out of the gates. They'll kick things off with a game on the road against the Miami Dolphins week 1, where they're 2.5-point dogs. They'll travel to Western Pennsylvania to take on the Steelers week 2, home against the Ravens, at the Packers, home against the Lions, at Cleveland, home against Chicago, at the Jets, before they play the Colts headed into their bye week 10. So we'll see exactly where New England is through 10 weeks and what a young quarterback can do while he continues to learn a new system and may not have the luxury of leaning on a defense that masks some of their offensive deficiencies, at least in Mac Jones's rookie campaign. Last but certainly not least, in the AFC East is the New York Jets. And the Jets come in as Super Bowl long shots at FanDuel Sportsbook, 150-1 to win the Lombardi Trophy. Long shots within the division, 24-1. And their win total sits at 5.5. You do, however, have to lay a juicy $1.60 at FanDuel to go over that total. And when you're talking about the New York Jets, they now have the longest active playoff drought in the National Football League, and they have the worst record in the NFL over the last 6 seasons. That's 1 game worse than the Jacksonville Jaguars and 6 games worse than the team that they share a stadium with in the New York Football Giants. They did, however, show moments of glory a season ago. They beat the number 1 seed in the AFC in the Tennessee Titans, and they did upset the Bengals as double-digit underdogs for 2 of their 4 wins last year. The Jets, well, they had miserable injury luck last season. By default, they should stay healthier this year, but they've been unfortunate for 3 straight seasons, and when it happens once, it's an outlier. When it continues to happen over and over again, you begin to wonder about the strength and conditioning program in terms of what's going on from an off-season workout standpoint. But of course, Jets fans, Payne, feeling plenty optimistic given the haul that they acquired in the NFL draft this season and expecting a massive progression in second-year starting quarterback Zach Wilson.
So what are you saying? The offseason program doesn't include running in 117-degree Vegas heat, ducking and dodging coyotes and rattlesnakes?
I mean, somewhere along the way, you got to step up, because if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. And if you can dodge a rattlesnake and coyotes, you should be able to dodge NFL defenders.
Okay. Offensively, I like what Joe Douglas has done. I've been pretty adamant about what he's contributed to acquiring talent over the last couple of years. I think he knows what he's doing, and he's completely reshaped the Jets offense. You have 5 new starters along the O-line and 2 off seasons. Vera Tucker and Mekhi Becton are moving to the right side of the line. Let's see how they handle that transition. It's not an easy one. I know Becton's dealt with injuries, only finished 8 games in 2 seasons. The hope is now that he's lost weight, the injury problems will subside a little bit. You have Fant and Tomlinson that are going to man the left side, Connor McGovern at center. Talent in namesake, this has the potential to be a fringe top 10 offensive line. But health and maximizing potential here is going to be vital, because the Jets O-line was 22nd in adjusted line yards and only created 1.2 yards of space before first contact for running backs last season. That's got to be better. Receiver group has been completely overhauled. Joe Douglas spent 3 top 60 picks on receivers the last 2 drafts. That's the same draft capital spent at the receiver position the past 22 years from the Jets front office. Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Garrett Wilson, and Denzel Mims are a solid 4. You sprinkle Braxton Berrios in as well. I love Elijah Moore. I think he proved last season without great quarterback play in a bottom 10 offense last season, he could still be wildly efficient. And on a per route basis, Elijah Moore was more efficient than any other rookie receivers like, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. Jets upgraded the tight end position with Uzama and Conklin, and both the receiver and tight end positions should be much healthier. You were kind of hinting at that. Jets had the 7th most injured receiver group, 5th most injured tight end core. Running backs are young and multiple. Michael Carter and Breece Hall, I like that duo. Carter averaged 1.5 yards per route run with just a 0.3 ADOT. So he's doing things after the catch quite well. Breece Hall had a 13% of Iowa State's reception share per game last year, forced 74 broken tackles when the ball was in his hands. So I do like this running back room a little bit. Not sure I would have spent that kind of draft capital there, but certainly that unit's much improved. So I think when you kind of look in totality and around the offensive room, the Jets' offense is upgraded in talent substantially. It doesn't really matter, though, if Zach Wilson doesn't take a substantial year 2 leap. Loved him at BYU. Loved the Jeff Grimes offense. BYU ran. But let's just call a spade here. Like, Zach Wilson played shook last season, and he looked overwhelmed. And I made the joke to you, Todd, that even on draft night, Wilson looked intimidating standing next to bigger guys. It looked like his eyes were wandering. He's like, what am I getting myself into here at draft night? Right? He was also super slow to process. Zach Wilson had the 36th slowest time to throw among 38 qualifying quarterbacks. Nearly 3.1 seconds it took Zach Wilson to throw the ball on average. So he ended up being pressured on 39% of dropbacks, and more than 26% of pressures turned into sacks. So lots of negative plays that kept the offense well behind the chains. Wilson was extremely inaccurate as well. Finished 31st out of 31 quarterbacks in completion percentage above expectation. Wilson was the only quarterback in the entire league to have a completion percentage 10% below expectation. And past the obvious of Zach Wilson's accuracy being a concern, when you look at Wilson's average intended air yards, it was 22nd out of 38 quarterbacks. So it's not like Wilson was pushing the ball downfield at an above average rate where you're willing to sacrifice some accuracy for explosiveness. And I don't really think coordinator's a problem here. Like, I am always willing to give a Kyle Shanahan protege a longer leash, and I actually think Mike LaFleur knows what he's doing. He put Zach Wilson in some positive situations. He used a top 5 motion rate. Didn't waste second down with runs. He called pass on nearly 85% of second and longs. But I think it's important now that LaFleur can kind of build Zach Wilson back up, grow his confidence, make Wilson a little bit more robotic, I think, with quick reads and quick passes, and allow guys to create some yak. That's, I think, where maybe the glimmer of hope lies, that Zach Wilson was top 10 in both accuracy and success rate when he released the ball in under 2.5 seconds. So you kind of have to get him mentally there, that we're going to run the offense. This isn't going to be street ball. We're not going to just, let things fly. Like, we have to kind of play within the confines of the offense. And I think when you can do that, there'll be some leaps made from Zach Wilson. You obviously draft Garrett Wilson. He's proven to be a huge yak guy at Ohio State. But that change in philosophy to getting the ball out quicker, being a little bit more robotic, is vital to monitor early in the season, because I think if that subtle change takes shape, we're going to be looking at a team that doesn't finish with one of the league's worst records. And you look at the Jets, they faced the 6th toughest schedule overall this season. And specific to the Jets offense, they face a projected top 10 schedule of both pass defenses and pressure rate defenses. So it's going to just be, that's one of the teams that I'm most fascinated by. I really am. It sounds shocking, but I just want to see what Zach Wilson looks like within the confines of this offense. And if we can monitor after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that he's getting the ball out quicker, the Jets are going to have a chance here offensively.
It's one of those cliches that we talk about all the time, that a team can look significantly better but may not show up in the win-loss column. And the Jets, to your point, knowing how difficult this schedule is, could fit that bill perfectly. But I think the eye test and some of the advanced metrics around Zach Wilson, that's what Jets fans need to pay the most attention to and make sure that they have indeed identified a quarterback of the future, one that they can build around and give them optimism for not just 22, but 2023 and beyond, given some of the skill position talents they surrounded him with and what Joe Douglas has done to build up this roster. Now, as far as the offense and some of the questions and concerns we have there are a bevy of them on the defensive side as well. When you look at what the Jets did defensively in terms of making some additions this offseason, they bring in DJ Reed from Seattle. You draft Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati and Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. You bring in Quan Alexander late, familiarity with Robert Saleh from their time in San Francisco. Quan, a shell of himself for what we saw last year, in my opinion, in New Orleans. You do lose Marcus May in the back end and Foley Futukasi as well. But the other thing for the Jets, hopefully for their sake, they get Carl Lawson healthy and on the field, can be a definite asset knowing that he's recovering from a torn Achilles and wasn't able to make an impact last year. But you look at some of these numbers for the Jets defensively, and their pass defense was a sieve, and that may be a little bit of an understatement when you consider this group was 32nd in 25-plus yard completions allowed, 30th in completion percentage allowed, 30th in passing yards per game, and tied for 30th in interceptions. Never a great ringing endorsement when you're that low on the passing scale, knowing most of your opposition was playing with a lead and could have been bleeding clock in the fourth quarter. The problem for the Jets, yes, the secondary looks a little bit better on paper, but they're going to need some of these young players to step up, and this still seems like a group very much in transition.
I would agree with that, but you are in year 2 of the system with Robert Saleh's defense. There's certainly more talent and hopefully better injury luck for a unit that had the most adjusted games lost to injury on defense in the entire league. And I think we should see improvement against the schedule of offenses projected to be below average this year. Jets defensive line should make a leap. They were 30th in pressure rate, 21st in adjusted sack rate, and below average creating havoc last season. You mentioned Carl Lawson. He was kind of the splash free agent signing last offseason, then he blew his Achilles in camp. He's back. Quinnen Williams continues to be one of the best interior pressure linemen, was 4th among defensive tackles in pass rush win rate. Sheldon Rankins is in a contract here. Solomon Thomas, the former first-rounder, reunites with Robert Saleh. He's coming off his best season. Then you draft Jermaine Johnson in round 1, and you sign Jacob Martin, who is a plus pass rusher in true pass rush situations for the Texans last year. Then you also have John Franklin Myers. He graded out the Jets' best defender last season, had a 13% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. The schedule of pass-protecting offensive lines projects to be in the bottom third of the league as well. So the Jets should create far more pressure and really fight, I think, to have a top 15 type defensive line. Linebacker group, as you alluded to, isn't great, but you do have some veterans there with C.J. Mosley and then the recently signed Quan Alexander this past Monday. But I like the much-needed help that was added to boost the secondary. You mentioned how young they are back there, and I would agree with that. But the unit was just so bad. It was an absolute sieve, and it was basically a combination of late-round picks, inexperience, and injuries, and that attributed to the worst pass defense in the NFL by a long mile. Down to down, the pass defense was horrific. On third downs, it was 31st through the air, and it was dead last in explosive pass defense, dead last in EPA per dropback, 31st in success rate per dropback. The secondary was horrific. So Joe Douglas goes out and drafts Sauce Gardner with the 4th pick. And so far through camp, he has been fantastic. And that's a guy who allowed 0.27 yards per coverage snap last season at Cincinnati. 0 touchdowns allowed in coverage and 3 picks. I look at him and you kind of just, you understand it, right? He's big, he's physical, a little bit handsy at times, but for a guy that size, he can flip his hips, which is a rare combination. Justin Reed rejoins Robert Saleh. He's coming off his best season in Seattle last year. Reed finished 27th among qualifying corners in adjusted yards allowed per coverage snap. Bryce Hall contributed positive snaps at corner. I think a reduced role is coming, but maybe he has better quality snaps in him if fatigue isn't a factor. Bryce Hall played nearly 1,200 snaps. That's far too many at this level. Brandon Echols was a rookie. Maybe he makes a year 2 leap, which adds some serviceable depth. Here's the overarching problem, Todd, and you did hint at it as we were leading into the Jets. And I think it's going to be something we say ad nauseum this preview season when talking about the AFC. Sure, the Jets are improved. On paper, they're better than last season. On the field, they have far more talent. But everyone else in the AFC improved too. Who are the Jets actually better than in this conference?
Sounds like a trick question. I'm not sure they're better than anyone top to bottom roster-wise in the entire conference. Other than the Houston Texans.
Okay, there you go. There's some teams that
I'm not using the
it's
Texans
very difficult
as a measuring stick for anything in the AFC.
This is what and this is my point.
Yeah.
Right, is that we are going to be talking about progression for some of these teams, that they are going to be better inevitably than they were last year. But who are they better than? And so I don't know what this looks like record-wise. And so that's, I think, a difficult thing for Jets fans to deal with, and in that they are going to be much improved, but you're still very much at the bottom of the totem pole in the AFC.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very real concern that I think you have to look at, not just in the National Football League, but also in college football. When you try and see an improved roster, you see a team making strides. It doesn't always translate to wins and losses. And to your point, when you go through the pecking order of overall rosters, not just at the quarterback position from top to bottom in the AFC, if the Jets had a zip code that placed them in, say, the NFC East, like the New York Giants, there'd be a lot more reason for optimism that some of that newfound talent that they've added to the roster could translate in the wins column this year. But I think for Jets fans, the number one thing you want to see to consider 2022 a success is that Zach Wilson shows flashes of being that franchise quarterback. Otherwise, you're right back where you started from, trying to identify the guy that can take this team where they want to go. At the postseason, a deep run in the playoffs, somewhere where they haven't been in quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, if Zach Wilson can go from being one of the worst quarterbacks in the league to below average, you're going to see a pretty hefty leap here for the Jets.
Should be an interesting team to watch, no doubt. When you look at the pecking order within the AFC East, we know the Bills are the top dog there. Miami should be an exciting watch, game in, game out. New England and the Jets, two teams that could be trending in different directions, both with very young quarterbacks. That much will be expected of in their sophomore campaigns. 4 down, Payne, 28 more teams to go with 7 other divisional previews still on deck. Before we get to an investable portion of the program, I want to encourage all of our loyal listeners out there, if they haven't already done so, FanDuel.com, use the promo code BetTheBoard, take advantage of your no sweat bet. If you happen to be listening in the car or on your mobile phone or wherever else you happen to download your podcast from, the link is clickable on the Bet the Board website. You can see that. It'll take you right to FanDuel. You're able to sign up, take advantage. Let FanDuel help you build your bankroll this football season, because we know it's going to be one of the best that we've put on the books. Looking forward to it in early September. But as always, Payne, I know we don't always have a win total or something that we can try and sink our teeth into, but as far as an investable opportunity with our first NFL podcast of the season, have you identified an opportunity to do so?
Miami Dolphins, over 8.5 wins, and it is available at FanDuel right this second. One of the better prices in the entire market. I'm not going to waste everybody's time because we spent 15 minutes breaking the Fins down. It's time-stamped. No need to hear what we think again right here. Just go back to that portion of the pod. And as you alluded to with the FanDuel promotions, Dolphins over 8.5, one of the best prices in the market at FanDuel.
Perfect way to try and take advantage of it with that no sweat bet. And as far as the preview schedule, Mondays and Thursdays, Payne, more or less going to be the standard operating procedure to get us in that regular season mindset going forward with 7 divisions on the horizon?
That is correct. Monday, Thursday will be the rotation. We will be back in just a couple days on Monday morning.
And want to encourage all of you who haven't already done so, go back, listen to all the college football Power 5 previews as well. We started those way back early on in the summer. Most of that information still extremely relevant. Some best bets may have moved, but it is the perfect way to get you prepared for a college football season rapidly approaching. And for all of you folks out there that may be NASCAR enthusiasts, encourage you to listen to the Stay Green podcast as well, which drops every Friday until they hand out the Cup Championship in early November. Follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. Follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And come early December with a Miami Dolphins win total ticket in hand. We'll see you at the window.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.